All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest to the show. It is Tasha from North Dakota. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Let's get right into it. Let's talk about this Bigfoot thing. What got you interested in the subject to begin with?
I grew up in East Texas, born and raised. My dad was actually originally from Arkansas. I grew up hearing all kinds of stories from him. He had quite a few things that had happened to him growing up and everything. So, as a young kid, I never really took part in it. I just thought, oh, they're spooky stories. The very first thing I remember ever happening that was very strange, I was probably about 4 years old. My dad used to take me and my brother, and my uncle liked to go along. We liked to go fishing. He'd put us on the back of this little tractor that he restored. We'd ride on the wheel wells. We'd go across this little land bridge between this pond on the back part of our property. We rented a property from the dairy farmer my dad worked for. We'd go down. There's a place called Black Creek Lake. A part of that lake actually fed into the back part of this property. So we'd all get on this tractor and we'd go down. We'd go fishing. Me and my brother, we'd hop off when we get there and tell us go play, go make mud pies or whatever, play with frogs. That's all we did as kids. He and my uncle would go down the bank and they'd go fishing. I don't know how long we were there for, not very long. And we started hearing this noise. You know what a bullfrog sound makes, like a wool noise? That's the noise we heard, but it was a lot louder, a lot deeper, and a lot longer. My brother and I, we went over to my dad. I was like, what is that noise? And he was, I don't know, be quiet. Let's listen. So we were listening. And it was getting louder and closer and louder and closer. And this area that we were at, the other side of this bank wasn't very far. I'd say maybe probably about 30 feet, 40 feet from one side of the bank to the other because it fed into the bigger part of the lake. So anyway, we were sitting there listening and we could hear snapping and popping and branches and stuff being broken. We could hear that noise. It was getting so loud. My dad, y'all go get back while the tractor can stay there. My dad was one of those guys that he was very rough and tumble. You listened when he told you to do something. So we ran up on the tractor and we sat there. The embankment kind of comes down. So the tractor was sitting up on the higher part and my dad and my uncle were down by the water. They were looking, we could hear them talking. They were looking across and everything. And we saw this big, dark, brownish black thing kind of start coming out towards the water. But spooked my dad. Just so you know, my dad's not one of those kind of people that get scared very easily. He's a very rugged person. It spooked him bad enough. They left their rods, actually, and they came up to the tractor and they left. So that was about when I was probably 4 years old. Now, I don't remember ever going back down there after that. That's my only memory of that and when that happened. So I would say that's probably the first time anything ever like that when it comes to Sasquatch or anything happening to me. The next time that I remember, I was about 15 years old. This would have been back in 2001. It was in the fall. It was cold, so I'd say it was probably October or November. It was a weekend, and I was staying the night at a friend's house. Her older brother, his name was Joey, was home from the Navy on leave. I liked her brother, so I was like, I want to stay the night at your house. So I went over and stayed the night at her house. It was probably about midnight, 1 o'clock, and Joey comes out and he's, hey, my computer and everything's over at my grandparents' house. Why don't we walk over there and I'll burn you guys some CDs? Back in the day, that's what they did. We burned CDs for music. And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds cool. So now this property sat between the outskirts of Bridgeport and Chico, Texas. In between these two towns, there's these big rock quarries. They're full with water. If you're familiar with what rock quarries are, their house was situated in the country part, like in between that. Their house was probably about half a mile from their grandparents' house, and they were all on the same piece of land. East Texas is actually very wooded. So they had this path that went from their house to their grandparents' house through the woods. It was just like this smashed down footpath. It wasn't super visible, but it was there. So Joey suggested, hey, why don't we cut through here so we don't have to go all the way around on the dirt road? I'm like, okay. We didn't have flashlights. It was actually a pretty bright moon out. We could see everything. We could see each other pretty well. We could see the outline of the trees and everything. So we leave there. It's probably, like I said, about midnight, 1 o'clock. We leave there and we start out on this trail. It goes out from the back of their house and it leads up to the back door of their grandparents' trailer house. So we start out and we're walking. We're just talking real low, whispering and everything. Like I said, Joey was older and he was a smoker at the time. So he lit up a cigarette and I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. He's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. He was leading us. Amber was in the middle and I was close up to her in the back. I'm walking, I'm whispering to Amber. I don't know what we were talking about. I can't remember. It's probably something about music. Over to my left side, I could hear something behind to my left. At first, it was like a light crunching sound. And I stopped him. I said, hey, guys, listen, do you hear that? They were like, no, I don't hear anything. I'm like, something's moving over here. And he's okay, let's just keep moving. So I was like, all right, didn't think too much of it. So we kept walking. Probably about 10 seconds later, could hear it again. And it was a lot closer. So I stopped him and I'm like, guys, you don't hear that? Listen. So we stood there for about 30 seconds, maybe a minute, listening, didn't hear anything. I'm like, there's something moving over here. Joey's, we have cattle back over on that side of the property where my dad's at. And I'm like, how far away is that? He goes, that's way over there. Are they behind fences? And he said, yeah, they are. Maybe one of them got out. I said, okay, let's hurry up and get there. So maybe we should cut through and head over towards the road. He was like, all right, let's do that because we could see better. There was more vision. We started to cut off this trail and make our own trail onto the gravel road. So as soon as we get onto the gravel road, we all hear whatever this is was right there. All of a sudden, it was right there. We all stopped. We could all hear it. It was so close. I feel like if it would have reached out, it could have touched us. We could hear it breathing. It was a very deep, raspy, almost like somebody had a hard time catching their breath, but it was very deep and uneven. We were just froze. We didn't say anything. After we all realized we could hear this, whatever this was, it growled at us. And it growled so long, loud, and deep that we didn't even stand around long enough to let it finish growling. We took off as fast as we could. We ran to the back porch of his grandparents' place. We went inside and we were just in shock. What just happened? What was that? I was like, okay, we were going through everything that it could have been. What in this area growls? It wasn't a wild hog. A wild hog doesn't growl. So we can scratch that. Maybe a coyote, but a coyote doesn't breed like that. We don't have wolves. We were going through everything we could think of. We did have cougars. We're like, what about a cougar? That was too deep and too heavy. It did not sound like a cougar. Obviously, a cougar is probably not going to let you know it's there until it's on you or trying to kill you. So we scratched that. We don't know what it was. We get into the room where the computer is, and Joey directly, there's been some weird stuff that's happened around here over the years. I was like, oh, like what? And he said, my uncle, he works for the rock quarries over in Chico. And he said one morning, about 2:00, 3:00 in the morning, he was on his way home. He saw something cross the road. He doesn't know what it was. He said he doesn't know what it was. He said it was some sort of weird thing. How far away was that? And he said it was about 3 miles from here. I was like, oh, really? So that was creepy. That was when I really started to think, okay, what could this have been? It bothered me for a very long time. Then I put it in the back of my head. I didn't really think of it too much. And I started getting onto Facebook and I was looking into Bigfoot groups and stuff like that. I met some friends over in North Carolina that had some things happen and seen some things and whatnot. So I brought it up to them. Basically was told that very well could have been a Sasquatch creature. I said, that would be interesting. I said, I never saw anything, but whatever it was, I can't explain the sounds. I can't explain what happened. The fact that when we stopped, whatever it was stopped, didn't make a sound when we would stop. But as soon as we would start walking, you'd hear it walking. So it was very strange. That is the main one that really got me thinking about this whole subject and really got me involved more into this whole realm of these creatures. And after that encounter or experience, I had many paranormal things happen. Now, going back to when I was 4 years old in that house, later on, my mom would actually tell me after I was older, she said, when we lived in that house, there were a lot of times me, your dad, and your grandma would sit out on the porch and we would hear things, just strange noises, strange hoots and howls, stuff crashing through the woods. She said it sounded like a bulldozer coming through the woods sometimes. I was like, really? I said, you never told me this stuff before. She's like, I didn't want to scare you. Because we played in those woods all the time. We were outside. We played in the woods. We'd always go down to the creek, stuff like that. She said they'd also sit out there and they'd watch these lights. She called them dancing lights. They'd sit out there on the porch and they'd look up into the trees and I'd see these lights just dance around in the trees or just above the trees. She thought that was the weirdest thing. Never really brought it up to me before. And I mentioned it to her a few years ago. I was like, Mom, you remember those dancing lights? I said, I've heard from some people on your show and other shows that kind of correlates with some of these happenings that go on. It's a very strange phenomenon. So back in 2002, I started going down to North Carolina. I was invited to go on an expedition or a hike, however you want to call it, on a friend's property. They used to hunt. This friend had reports of all kinds of stuff going on, things coming up, slapping his house. It got to the point where he and his brother wouldn't go hunting in these woods alone anymore. I was invited to come out with a group of us and go hiking. I get there. I'm the kind of person that I don't go out into the woods without being armed. So we were all armed. We go out into the woods. We're hiking back. We get back probably about 3 or 4 miles into the woods. I've never been here my whole life. I'm completely reliant on this gentleman to know where he's at and how to get back. I start getting a little bit nervous because not knowing where I am, not knowing the area. I just tell him, you know what, why don't we just stop here, collect ourselves a little bit? Because I like to stop, look around, check where I'm at, look behind me every 10, 20 paces. It's just what I do. So I stop, I'm just getting a breather, getting a drink of water. And I just had this feeling, turn around, check where you are. And when I turn around, I see this big black mass of something. This is October. Leaves have fallen off. You can see pretty well through the trees. There's no greenery or anything really. So I'm looking and I see this big black mass. And I'm like, hey, come here. Do you see that? And I'm pointing it out. And they're like, yeah, I see that. I'm looking around everywhere else. I'm doing a scan of the whole area. There's nothing else in this area that looks like what I'm looking at. So I get my phone out and I'm videoing and I'm topping just in case. As I'm videoing, mind you, you know what the woods are like. You can't see straight to this thing. There's things that are in the way. So I see this thing, whatever it is, shift its weight from one side to the other, just enough of a movement to where I saw it move. So it took my breath away. I didn't expect it to move. I catch my breath and I'm like, it just moved. Holy crap, it just moved. Then I start to get nervous. I put my phone away and I didn't look at it right away. I didn't know if I caught anything on camera or not. We continue hiking a little bit. I'm ready to go. It's in my mind. I'm nervous. I'm ready to go. So I tell everybody, look, I'm ready to get out of here. Let's go back. The way we went back, I knew we were going to have to cut back around where it was that we saw this thing because it was following from my perspective where we were. So the direction we came in is the direction we're leaving. So we're going to have to go by this area this thing was standing. I'm really nervous because I don't know if this thing's still there. We cut back and we come around this great big tree where I feel like this is the area it was standing or where it was. The landowner, his oldest son, my other friend, and I. So there was 4 of us. We all at the same time walk into this smell. It was like a blanket. 1 second you smell it, 1 second you don't. So we're walking and all of a sudden it hits us like a wall. This absolute pungent smell of death. It smells like rotting flesh. It's really hard to describe. It was putrid, very strong. It smelled like death. It just smelled like something was dead and rotting, and it was an old smell. You know what I mean? It was like an aged, musty death smell. As quick as we walked into it, and we're standing there in the same spot, it's gone. We haven't moved, but this smell is gone. It's almost like we walked into the smell and then it left us. So without us moving, this smell just disappeared. We walked all around that area within 10, 15 feet of the same area, couldn't smell anything. Upwind, downwind, we couldn't smell anything anymore. It was just gone. Very strange. We took note of that and just said, okay, that was really weird. Let's just go. So then we left. That was that experience in that day. Later on, I go through my phone. I'm watching this video and I'm going back and forth, clip to clip. I can just barely, and it's very hard to see, but just barely you can see this black mass shift its weight just ever so slightly, maybe not even 2, 3 inches. You can just see it just enough to move. You can't see detail or anything. It's just a black thing that moves. And it's tall. You can make out what looked like maybe a head and a shoulder, and then it just shifts to one side. But other than that, not a lot. A blob spot, if you will, just a dark thing. Then let's see here. Went hiking several times in the general area. So are you familiar with the Uari Mountains in North Carolina by chance?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. The famous stump in the Westmore's campground where they have the candy bar and this thing crawls up and grabs the candy bar off the stump. You're aware of that story? I went to this place. It's Westmore's campground. It's in the Uari Mountains in North Carolina. It's very out there in the woods. There's not a lot around it. There's a spot. It's a parking spot number 10. That's the famous number 10 spot where all that happened. I pull in. This is my first time ever there. I'm by myself. I actually have my little dog Dixie with me. She's a little corgi. She likes to travel with me. I pull in. I have every intention on staying the night. Like I said, I grew up in East Texas. I'm not really afraid of the woods or to be by myself. Oh, this will be nice, somewhere new. I knew about this area from a friend of mine that lived several miles away, but knew the area, had gone hiking in this area several times. I pull in number 10. I park facing out. Obviously, I don't want to be messing around. Back in, and I set everything up. I'm car camping. I don't set up a tent or anything. I just hunker down. It's actually been raining, so you can hear the raindrops and stuff on the car. Nobody's in there. It's on a weekday. Funny thing is there's not really a lot of people in that area that like to go out when it's raining. So I was by myself, nobody around. I get out, I get Dixie out. We go for a walk around the campground just to get myself familiar with what's around, who's around, if anybody's there, just to familiarize myself with the area. Get her a good walk and come back, get her in the car, just lay down. It's getting dark at that time, about 7, 8 o'clock at night. I'm just watching a movie on my phone. I have the 2 front windows cracked, maybe about an inch, just enough to get a little bit of airflow and so I can hear. I have my handgun beside me. There's cup holders in the back of my car. It actually fit a full-size blow-up mattress in the back. It was perfect. So I had my little handgun sitting in the cup holder. I slept with my shotgun beside me. I'm more afraid of people. I'll just put it that way. I had my shotgun beside me. My dog Dixie had her little bed in the front passenger floorboard. That's just where she wanted to stay. It's where her little bed fit. So she was down there. You'd hear something, almost like a gravel crunch, because where we park, it's gravelly. I could hear what sounded like gravel. So I stopped my movie. I'm listening. I don't hear anything. I start my movie. I have the volume way, way down. And again, I hear this crunch. So I'm like, okay. So I put my phone down. It's completely pitch dark. Can't see anything. Can't see your hand in front of your face. I make sure I can feel my gun beside me just in case. And I'm listening and I hear this. It almost sounded like a wolf howl, but not. It was more guttural. So when you hear a wolf howl, you've got that distinctive sound. Okay, it didn't sound like that. It sounded more like a yell. It was enough to get my attention and my dog's attention. She jumped in the back and she was right up on my chest and she was shaking. She didn't growl. She didn't bark. She didn't anything. She didn't even whimper. Whatever this thing was that let out this noise, I could hear what sounded like it was walking around my car. Not close, but I could hear it moving around my car. So I'm like, okay, if this is a person, because I'm not familiar with this area, if this is a person, I'm not going to say anything until they get close enough to the car. I didn't think it was a person just because There was no flashlights. There was no cars. This campground is somewhat close to a highway. So when cars go by, you can hear cars, especially at night because it reverberates off of the forest. You can hear it. I didn't hear any cars. So if this was a person, they would have been walking in the dark. There was absolutely no sight of any flashlights, anything to tell me that it might have been a person. I'll just put it that way. They would have had to walk in the dark, unable to see your hand in front of your face. You're going to kill yourself in the woods. I started getting nervous. I started to slide down into my driver's side to turn the car on. When I did that, all the noise quit. It was still lightly raining. I could hear the rain, but all the other noise quit. I got into my car, driver's side. I turned the car on, lights came on. I turned the brights on. I couldn't see anything. I had a big flashlight. It was very bright. I got that out and I actually somehow had the courage to get out of my car, just stand beside my door and scan around the car, around one side, around where I'm at. I didn't see anything. No eye shine, nothing. Got back in my car, shut the car off, locked all the doors. I didn't hear anything for the rest of the night. That was very strange. My dog didn't leave my side. She's not usually one to bark and stuff, but when she's home, if there's coyotes around, she'll bark. But she didn't make a noise. So that was very unusual of her. That's that experience. After that, I'd been back to that area numerous times, even with my kids would come over with me, travel with me, and we'd go hike, not very far. We just hike around the campground and stuff. But my daughter, she wanted to leave peanut butter out. I was like, all right, something fun for her to do. So I took her back. Probably you could still see the car. We walked into the woods just over this little brook down from the campground. I don't know, maybe 100 yards into the woods. You could still see the car. I was like, this might be a good spot. Just sit it here. She puts it down and we walk out, go home. About a week later, 2 weeks later, I come back to the area and I'm like, I'm going to go see if anything was messed with. Jar was gone. I was like, well, that sucks because I don't really like leaving the jar out there, but we couldn't find it. A friend of mine actually came. They're a couple. So it was he and his wife came out with me and we were hiking around and we went back to this little brook. They were going to do a video for his YouTube channel. And I just told him, I was like, I feel weird. Let's just hurry up. Probably about 20 seconds after I said that, this is a rock that got thrown at us down off of the side of the mountain. Just to give you perspective, size of my hand in this rock, it's actually got pretty decent weight to it. This rock comes up through the trees, so not down up the side of this mountain. It was through the top of the trees because you could hear it through the top of the trees. We watch it hit the other side of the embankment from where we were standing. You could feel the thud it hit. We watched it roll down in the leaves towards the brook we were standing at. We all froze. Didn't say anything. There's not a sound in the forest, nothing. There's no birds, no nothing. I'm shaking. The fight or flight kicks in and I'm ready to go. Well, I'm like, okay, let's make our way back to the car. I think because I'm not going to stand around here and wait, see what else gets thrown or whatever. So I'm anxious to go. They're like, just wait, just listen. I was like, I don't want to listen. I want to go. We're standing there and probably about 2 or 3 minutes later, we hear possibly whatever threw this at us move down further back behind this. It's like small rolling mountains. It moves back further off of this. I'm going to call it a hill because it's not a very tall mountain. It moves back behind and then it cuts down to our left, like it's going to cut around behind us and cut us off between us and our vehicle. I'm starting to get nervous because you can hear this thing moving and it's snapping, popping. It's loud. Snap, pop. And it's cutting down back behind us. And I'm like, we need to go now because whatever this is, if it's going to cut us off in between, we're not going to be able to get to our car. I am walking as fast as I can on very uneven ground, very soggy ground. I'm worried I'm going to twist my ankle. We're walking over logs, crossing little streams and stuff. I'm actually far enough in front of the other two that I have to stop and wait for them to catch up. So I'm facing them, waiting for them to catch up. I'm like, come on, hurry up, let's go. I hear this really loud snap. I can't even tell you how maybe big this branch was or limb that stabbed, but it was very loud. It was very close. I froze because it literally sounded like it was on top of me. So I froze and I'm standing there. They stop walking. This is the part that freaks me out the most is they're looking at me and they stop walking and they're looking in my direction. So I'm facing them, they're facing me. The first thought in my mind is something's behind me. Something's very close to me and they're looking at this thing. They're not looking at me, they're looking beyond me at this thing, whatever it is. I'm terrified. I'm not moving. They start rushing me. They're running towards me. When they start moving, I feel like I have to move. So I turn around and I start heading back towards the car. I don't see anything. I get to the car. I'm hitting the button to the car, like the alarm button, like to unlock it. You can hear the beeping. Hitting this button, just maybe this noise is going to scare whatever this is. I don't know what I was thinking, but just hitting the button to the car. I think I was hitting the unlock button actually so that we could get in the car. I was hitting the button. I make it to the car first. I get in, I start the car. They're at the car. So they had to have been moving pretty quickly. So when we get in, they're like, go. I go. We're leaving. And then again, this is the same campground area, West Morris. It's the same area. We get in the car and we leave. We don't say anything to each other other than, what the heck was that? I didn't want to ever go back there, at least not for a while, because that was pretty scary. A few months, I'd say probably 2 or 3 months go by. I go back down to the area. They had this bright idea. There's trails that go back up behind this campground, like hiking trails. And there's other parts of this Uari area that you can actually take Jeeps up on the Jeep trails and stuff. And they're pretty rugged. You have to have a pretty good vehicle to get back in there. They had this bright idea, hey, we're going to go for a hike in the evening back behind this campground. And I'm like, all right, I've never done a night hike before. Let's do it. Just before dark, it was enough light out where we could get going, still see pretty well. So I'd say probably about 6, 7 o'clock. We have flashlights. Obviously, we're armed. We're walking up this trail. We get probably maybe 2 miles back. You'd come to this part in the trail where you cross this little grassy meadow. And then right beyond that is nothing but pine trees. They call it the pine thicket. It's all pine trees. There's no other kind of trees. It's just pine. We get to the end of that trail and you can see across these pine trees. I'm like, I'm not going in there. It was like I hit a wall. I didn't want to go any further. This is it. We're not going any further. We all agree, okay, we're not going to go back in there. So we're standing around just talking, waiting for it to get darker. By the time it gets to the point where we can just see each other's shadows, we start heading back. We turn our flashlights on. So there's big rocks and tree limb roots and stuff you can trip over. So it's a pretty dangerous little trail. So we have our flashlights, we're walking through, and we're just meandering through like it's a normal hike, just talking normally, not whispering, just talking and walking, making noise. We all hear this loud thump noise. Happens. It's one of those that you can feel in your feet. It makes us all stop. Mind you, we're not like super close to each other. We're probably within 3 or 4 feet of each other walking. We all feel this thump and we hear this thump and we stop and we're listening. We don't hear anything. And then we realize we don't hear anything else. There's no crickets. There's nothing. It's just dead quiet. We're maybe halfway back. So we hiked in probably about an hour and a half, and we're still half an hour to 40 minutes of a hike to get out yet. So we're like, all right, let's pick up our pace. Let's keep going because at this point, we're all nervous. We can't hear anything else in the woods but us. So we're walking and we're trying to actually stay quiet now because we're the only ones making any kind of noise. Then we hear this whistle, very distinctive, one quick whistle, almost like someone's whistling for you to like, hey, just a quick whistle. We stop. We turn off all of our lights. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. I thought it was a stupid idea. So let's turn all your lights off. Turn your lights off. Like, well, I'm not turning my light off. I want to be able to see if something's coming. That didn't sound like it was very far away. Anyway, we turn our lights off. I'm literally huddled up, shoulder to shoulder, next to his wife, and I'm standing there, and she's shaking. I don't know if she's making me shake or if I'm making her shake, but she's shaking. I'm like, okay, we need to keep moving. We can't just stand here. We can't move unless we turn our lights on. So after about 3 or 4 minutes, we decide, okay, we'll turn the lights back on. Still no noise other than us. Absolutely no noise. We're walking. I would say probably about a good 10, 15 minutes go by. We still don't hear anything else. We start to settle in. Okay, nothing else is going to happen. We're okay. We're maybe 10 minutes from the car. Snap, snap, pop on the left side of us. Down on this other ridge, snap, pop, snap, pop. So there's something on the right side of us. There's something on the left side of us. It's not directly beside us. It's behind us. We hear this movement on either side of us. I know North Carolina has bears. I am absolutely terrified of bears. I do not like bears. I never, ever in my life want to encounter a bear in the wild. So that's actually my first thought. Aside from the whistle, I wasn't even thinking of that. I was like, I hope it's not bears. My friends, I don't think that's a bear. I'm like, okay, do I hope this is a bear or do I hope it's not a bear? We're walking and we hear these noises and it's coming up. So it's not necessarily getting closer to us this way. It's getting closer to us from the side. It's coming up to the trail. Sorry, I'm shaking right now. We're walking a lot faster now at a very brisk walk. With our flashlights, we can just see the reflection of the car lights. I keep telling myself, don't run. I have to keep repeating out to myself, don't run. All of a sudden, whatever these things are, they come up to the edge of the trail and stop. We can't hear anything anymore. When it stops, we actually stop because we're close to the car. We're like, okay, if we have to really move to get to the car, maybe we can make it. So we all stop, we turn our flashlights off and we're listening. We don't hear anything else. Then we hear, I would say, we were standing there for maybe a minute or two. We're not hearing anything, still no bug noise. We hear a whistle on one side, then we hear a grunt on the other side, and then nothing. Then we hear a whistle on the other side, and then a grunt on the other side. So they're whistling and grunting, whatever this is, back and forth to each other, probably 3 or 4 times. Then it just went silent. There was nothing. My friend gets the bright idea to whistle back. So whistle back, nothing. Whistles again, nothing. He whistles a couple times, 2 or 3 times. The last time he whistled something, I want to say it might have been a stick, it might have been a rock. I didn't see anything because we had no lights on. Whatever it was, it threw something across and it landed in the middle of where this trail was. We know that because part of this trail, it had rocks. It was rocky. It sounded like it hit the middle of this trail we were on. So we turned lights on and there's nothing there. We heard it hit. We heard something get thrown, but we don't know where it's at. At that point, we make it to the car. We get in the car and we leave. So that's that experience. I never went night hiking again after that. That was the one and only time I ever went night hiking after that. There was one other incident in this same general area. There's a location, it's called Reservation Road. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
Okay. So there's a little town area called El Dorado. There's actually a very popular spot that all the Jeeps, before they go up on the trails, they stop and they fuel up and they get food. It's called El Dorado Outpost. On the other side from where West Morris and all that is, you come through on that highway and you cut off on this road and it's called Reservation Road. You go down, there's some little camp areas down there, picnic tables and stuff just as you turn in. There's a big porta potty house out there, benches, places people can set up tents and stuff. You bypass that and you go down this road. You go all the way down. There's a gun range out there. When you get to the end of this road, there's this big cul-de-sac area and it leads up to some other trails. On a separate night, I pulled into there, circled around again, facing out because I'm not silly. I want to face out. I have a recorder. It's actually an older recorder a friend of mine gave me. They're hard to find now, actually. But I have a recorder. I have my headphones plugged into it and I just have it hanging out the side of the window. And I'm listening because you can hear everything pretty clear with this recorder, actually a lot louder than your natural ear. I'm listening, recording sounds, see if I hear anything. And I'm sitting in the driver's side of my car. It's a pretty moonlit night. You can see the shadows and stuff. It's cloudy. So when the clouds come over, you can see the shadows moving on the ground. So it was a pretty bright night. This whole area that I'm sitting in is all gravel. You can see, like, it almost looks like white from the gravel. I can see the different textures of the tree line and the bushes in front of me. So I'm parked here facing out. And the way I'm facing, the cul-de-sac area is to my left, and I'm facing towards the right to go out on the road, basically. The front of my car is at an angle, and I can see a whole big section of the trees in front of me and a big section of the road that's going out. I'm sitting there. I don't know what time it is. It's late, probably 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm listening. I don't hear anything. I'm actually starting to get bored, trying not to fall asleep. I just open my eyes and I look out my windshield right across from where I'm sitting. It's not a huge distance, but it's some distance. I'd say probably 10, 15 feet is the tree line. Something, I don't know what, comes out of this tree line. How do I explain this? You know what a crab looks like? Vision a big black crab come out of the woods in a horseshoe shape. So it comes out of the woods. I could see, I guess it's arms and legs or whatever, going up and down like a crab. And it comes out of the trees and goes right back in. It was almost like it came out, saw my vehicle, and was like, oh crap, and went right back into the trees, like very quick, like 1, 2, 3, gone, like not even 3 seconds. It was just, it came out and right back in. I don't know what it was. All I know is it was a dark figure. I could see what it looked like. Its arms and legs were going like up and down, but it moved like a crab. And the way it came out and went back in, it was almost like it came in sideways. Does that make sense? It's hard to explain. The way a crab walks is sideways. Just imagine watching a crab come out and back in sideways. I'm like, what was that? Whatever was on all fours, but it was too big to be a bear. And then I got to thinking, okay, but I could see long, like almost like long limbs coming out from the body of it. It was like this crab thing came out and right back into the woods. I didn't see a face. It was just a figure, but I could see, I am assuming what was its arms and legs just moving up and down in that crab motion and right back into the woods. No idea what it was. I didn't hear a thing on my recorder. I could hear everything else. There was sounds of the forest. I didn't hear trees snapping. I didn't hear bushes moving. I didn't hear gravel because I was sitting on gravel and it came out far enough that it was on the gravels. I would have thought, okay, I would have heard the gravel noise. I didn't hear gravel noise. I don't know what it was. I don't know what I saw, but it was weird. I just put it in that little box of, okay, that was weird. I don't know what it was. I can't explain it, but I saw it and who knows what it was. That was the only time I ever sat on that road and the only time I ever saw anything. It's just weird, strange.
As you're telling the story, I don't know how accurate this may or may not be, but I'm envisioning there's an illustration, I guess, of somebody's eyewitness account of what they said they saw a Sasquatch doing. They call it the spider crawl.
I've heard of that.
It's down on all fours. The arms and the legs are in this weird position, but that's what I'm envisioning in my brain as you're telling the story. I'm sure anybody who's listening to this now that's familiar with this illustration, and I'll try to find it before we post this for you guys to check out over on the blog for this episode. Hopefully I'll be able to find this image. I'm sure it's pretty common. I've seen it multiple times, but that's what I'm envisioning. Let me ask you this. There's a couple of questions I want to go back to in some of the other stuff that we talked about, but is that the impression that you got given that you've heard of these things crawling and doing spider crawl on all fours? Obviously it's subjective. You didn't see, you can't say definitively what it was, but do you get the impression looking back in hindsight now, do you think it was possibly a Sasquatch on all fours or you think it might've been something else?
I can't say. I personally would say it was likely a Sasquatch in that movement, in that position, because I've never seen anything ever like that before. And I don't know what else to classify it as, honestly. But knowing, like you said, knowing that It's been reported that they do that. But see, this thing wasn't huge. It wasn't big, but it was big enough that it was bigger than me. I don't know any person that could get down on all fours and move like that, not in one fluid motion like that. There's no way.
The other thing I want to go back to, working my way chronologically backwards here, the rock that you held up, and I'll do a still or something of that so you guys can see it over on the blog for the episode. Impression at the time when you guys were in the moment and that thing came flying in, that this thing was out to do you harm, or do you think it was just warning you off? What do you feel about the rock throwing thing in the moment and in hindsight looking back at it?
In the moment, I would say, to be honest, I feel like it was trying to deter us. Like maybe we were in its path. I was scared. I was shaking. I was ready to go. But again, thinking about it and in hindsight, I don't feel like it was trying to hit us. It was trying to harm us, really. It was trying to say, hey, I'm here. Get out of here. Because I feel that if it wanted it to hit us, it very well could have. The projection of how far this rock was, because we didn't see what it came from. It came from a very good distance away. Mind you, it was on a taller hill from us. Obviously, the trajectory from that might have helped some as far as the distance of where it was coming from. But the fact that myself, when we were there, I was throwing that rock. My friend was throwing that rock, and neither of us could make it very far. There's no way a person from that distance, not being able to see who threw it at us from that distance, there's no way we wouldn't have known who it was. But we didn't see anybody. We just heard and saw the rock where it landed, and that was a pretty far throw. Whatever that had to have had the strength to throw it that far. I'll just put it that way. But I don't feel like it was trying to purposely hurt us. I think we were in its way.
Fair enough. The other thing I want to go back to is the first experience you talked about. You were around 4 years old, your uncle and your dad leaving their fishing poles behind and coming up and getting on the tractor and getting you guys out of there. I'm curious, did your dad ever revisit that? Did he ever talk to you about, or have you had the conversation with him about what he and you guys saw that night? Did he think it was a Sasquatch? Did he have that in his nomenclature? Was that something that he had dealt with as far as you're aware of in the past or have any knowledge of?
That incident in particular, we never spoke of. He never mentioned it that I know of. He and my uncle didn't talk about it either. It was just something he never brought up. And like I said, my dad, he was brought up down in the rugged. Him and several other siblings, they grew up very poor, very hard off. My uncle that we went fishing with, he could actually take a stone, throw it. That's how he hunted rabbits. He would actually throw a stone, and I went with him one time. He would throw a stone and he'd hit a rabbit in the head and knock it out. And that's how they went rabbit hunting. So knowing my dad was very difficult to scare. He wasn't afraid of anything. There was times he'd go out of the house in the middle of the night, thinking in hindsight about different stuff that happened around that particular house that we lived in, where we went fishing behind. A lot of strange stuff happened out there. He would go outside, fire off a shotgun, wasn't afraid of anything. He'd walk around the house, that sort of stuff. I just thought he was very brave. He never brought up that incident at all.
It doesn't surprise me at all. That's a common theme that I hear over and over. It's so interesting. This is one of my favorite things about the job. Before I clicked record, you and I were talking about, I've been doing interviews all day. One of those interviews was a guy that is actually over in the United Kingdom. He's a big fan of the show. He's been listening since the beginning. He's very much into data. He's a data guy. He went on to the BFRO website. Obviously, his interview will be out for everybody to listen to. I'm sure Wayne and I will talk about this on that Bigfoot podcast at some time, because he emailed us a couple of weeks ago and started sending us over some of the statistical breakdown. He went through almost all of the data that's available on the BFRO website, which is, I think he said something like 5,000 plus. And he didn't obviously read every single report, but he took all of this data and put it together. One of the things that I kept making note of as you were talking is, he said, statistically, you would think, most of us think, at least when I first got into this, and up until recently when I started doing my own research, I would always just assume that you would see and have more Bigfoot experiences and or Class A encounters in the summertime. There's more people out, it's nice weather, everything's out during the summer. But actually, no, it's the month of October, which is interesting because a couple of your experiences happened in the month of October. You said there was a couple of time lapses that went on between leaving and coming back. I don't know if you really looked into dialing into how many of your experiences have happened on or near the month of October, but I found it statistically interesting that I just had this conversation with him today. He made the comment. He joked, we're right in the middle of October. If you're going to have an experience with Bigfoot, go out into the woods now because it might happen. That's just one of those little things that I love about this is because I'm having this conversation with him earlier today, and then you're talking about things that happened 2001, 2002, and just as recently as a few years ago. The little nuances, rain. You mentioned rain was another thing that he talked about. Statistically, the sightings tend to go down in the rainy times because very few people like to be out in the rain. Nobody wants to go camping in the rain. Nobody wants to hike in the rain. So the fact that you were out there and you were the only person there and had that experience, I find it very interesting because it could have very easily been somebody else and they might have had the exact same experience that most people won't because they don't put themselves in a campground in the middle of the week. Most people go on Saturdays. Statistically, Saturday is the best day for a Sasquatch sighting because that's when most of them are reported because it's a human thing, because we're out hiking, hunting, and doing all the things that we do typically on Saturdays. Because if you're a normal person, most people have a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday kind of situation as far as work. It's just all these little nuances I find interesting. I'm kicking myself because I'm in North Carolina. It's been on my bucket list forever to go to the Uwharrie, and you're in North Dakota. You know more about the Uwharrie area than I do because you've been there a ton of times. I haven't gone out to that area specifically because I think it's oversaturated with so many accounts that have come out of there recently. It's my own fault. I've had several people on multiple times that have had experiences in the Uwharrie. And I think podcasts and shows that have done, I don't know if Finding Bigfoot's been out there. I think they did an episode out in the Uwharrie or in that area. I think we've done ourselves a little bit of a disservice because I do think there's a lot of people out there now. It's hard to discern what's real and what's not, but I certainly want to get out to that area because there's so many amazing stories that come out of there and people are still having experiences that they can't explain that aren't related to people. I think it's interesting that you've been out there several times and had different experiences at different times of the year.
I would say I've been out to the Uari area. And to keep in mind, the Uaris aren't just in one spot, it's spread out. So you'll have a group of Uari forests here, and then over here you'll have another group, and over here you'll have. So there's different areas of the Uaris you can go because it's pretty good size area. Now, I've been there probably about 10 or 12 times in the past couple of years. There's another area, and I don't know if I want to say it is connected to the Uaris, but there's another small area, a group of trees that I've hiked back into. And like I said, I have so many different experiences. I can't distinguish if it's Sasquatch, if it's something else. I've caught things on camera. I caught something on my night vision sitting in number 10 at West Morris in the rain. There's so many different things. And I don't experience something every time I go out. I experience something maybe 1 out of 5 times. So I can go there many times during one visit. But I've only been to North Carolina probably, I want to say 12 to 15 times. I don't want to sell it short because it's been quite a few times. But as far as being out in the woods, probably 25, 30 times. So I've had these different experiences, but not every time. Somebody thinks if you're going to go out into the woods and you have an experience, it's going to happen more often than not. That's not true. You are less likely to have an experience than you are to have an experience. The fact that I've had all of these different things happen, most of the time I've been by myself. There's been a few times I've been with a couple of other people. It doesn't matter if you're by yourself or if you're with a few people, if you're in the rain or if you're not. So when you say most of all these things happen in October, you're right. Most of the times that I've been out there and had something unexplainable, I want to say, or seen something, it has been from probably September, October, all the way to January, February. So all the things I've had happen is from the fall through the winter in that area. I don't know why or what that is, but I will say the one area that I'm talking about, West Morris and those trails, the Jeep trails, those Jeep trails have a season. In the summertime, there's a lot of people that are being very loud and very noisy with those Jeeps. There's a bunch. I've been out there in the summertime, and you can't drive down that road without passing 20 Jeeps within 10 minutes because they're all following each other. They're all going up into the trails, even at night. I feel that these creatures in that area, they know when open season is. So when all those Jeeps and those trails close and Jeeps aren't allowed to come into those trails, they come back and they get closer to that camp area than they normally would when there's a lot of people. I've heard, because there's people that would actually talk about it that I ran into, there'll be a report almost like clockwork. There'll be 1, 2, 3 reports right at the beginning of open season for those trails. Somebody will have a sighting or they'll have an experience, and then there'll be nothing for the rest of that season because there's too many people. There's too much noise. That's my opinion.
You definitely may be right. I'm making a note to myself. I need to take my trip to the Uaris probably somewhere around October, November. I think that's going to be a date for myself. Maybe it won't happen this year, maybe in 2025. Tasha, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences. I've had a blast talking to you.
No, thank you so much for having me and for letting me share. It's been great. Thank you so much. I haven't ever been on a podcast before, so I'm very thankful.